Active Directory is stored and managed through domain controllers. A server that is not running a domain controller is a member server. The only time you cannot access the local users and groups console is when the computer is a domain controller. Since Active Directory is dependent on DNS, if a user is having problems logging into a domain, the computer could have DNS issues. Several MMC snap-in consoles are available to manage Active Directory, and they include Active Directory users and computers, Active Directory domains and trust, Active Directory sites and services, Active Directory Administrative Center, and the Group Policy Management Console. When a user logs on, Active Directory clients locate an Active Directory server using the DNS SRV resource records, known as a domain controller, in the same site as the computer. If you receive an error message saying that it cannot locate a domain controller, or you get a RPC server unavailable message, you should make sure you are pointing to the correct DNS server and that the DNS server has the correct SRV resource records for the domain controller. To help organize network resources such as users, groups, and computers, the Active Directory leaf objects are organized within organizational units. Organizational units also allow you to assign managers to manage those resources within an organizational unit. And group policies are assigned to domains and organizational units. By delegating administration, you can assign a range of administrative tasks to the appropriate users and groups. You can assign basic administrative tasks to regular users or groups, and leave domain-wide and forest-wide administration to members of the domain admins and enterprise admins groups. You can also help secure your network from accidental or malicious damage by limiting the membership of administrators in the administrator groups. Users, groups, printers, and computers are known as objects within Active Directory. Since these objects are assigned a unique security identifier, if an object is deleted, you cannot recreate the object with the same name and have it can remain the same rights and permissions as the deleted object. Instead, you will have to restore the object from a backup. Active Directory objects are assigned a 128-bit unique number called a globally unique identifier, or a GUID, sometimes referred to as a security identifier, SID, to uniquely identify an object. If a user changes his or her name, you can change the name, and he or she will still be able to access all objects and have all of the rights as before, since those rights are assigned to the GUID. By now, domain user accounts should be easy to understand, since you have already seen local user accounts. While the domain user accounts are stored within the domain controllers and can be seen by all domain computers, notice that there are many more options and parameters for the domain user account when compared to the local user account. Here we can see that users in a domain contain many more properties or attributes than the local account. The profile can be directed to a network location which allows roaming profiles. This means that when the user logs into any computer in the domain, their files and settings will follow them. Also noticed here, the home folder is connecting the UNC, Universal Naming Convention, location of 2200 server 01, that's the server name. Home is the folder or path location share, and the username to a mapped drive labeled M:. Another option is to restrict the time the user is able to log on, which can be a security standard. Active Directory computer accounts are used to enhance network security by having the computers part of the authentication process. You can also configure certain security settings automatically for any computer that is part of the domain using group policies. Like user accounts, computer accounts are assigned passwords. When the computer is added to the domain, and those passwords are automatically maintained between the computer and the domain controllers. Unfortunately, from time to time, a computer account can become untrusted where the security identifier or password is different from those stored in Active Directory. Unfortunately, you cannot reset the password. Instead, the best thing to do is to rejoin the computer to the domain. This usually happens when you deploy a computer from an image of another computer and you do not use the sysprep tool to reset the SID. The computer account becomes corrupted and the computer is not connected to the domain network for long periods of time. These things can happen. In Active Directory, users and computers will be mostly managed through groups. Therefore, if you need to give some access to a resource or to perform some task, you should assign rights or permissions to a group and then add the user or computer to the group. Again, if the user and computer are part of a domain, technicians and administrators will need to manage groups. Any group, whether it is a security group or a distribution group, is characterized by a scope that identifies the extent to which the group is applied to the domain tree or forest. The three group scopes are domain local group, global group, and universal group. The bottom line here is that group policy is one of the most powerful features of Active Directory that controls the working environment for user accounts and computer accounts. Group policy provides the centralized management and configuration of operating systems, applications, and users' settings in an Active Directory environment. For example, you can use group policies to specify how often a user has to change his or her password, what the background image is on a person's computer, or you can specify if spell checking is required before sending an email. Group policies. This section is intended as an overview of group policies. When you take the Microsoft course on Active Directory, group policies is covered in 3 chapters. Instead, this section should let us know how group policies can affect a domain user or a domain computer running Windows 7. You should also note that when discussing group policies, this would also include the local policies. Here we see the Group Policy Management Editor and some of the options available to us under Security Options. None of these options are currently defined in this slide. One of the things that group policies include is user rights. For example, if you want the ability to log on directly to a server, the user will need to have the Allow Log On Local right. To log on to a server remotely, the user will have to have the Allow Log On Through Terminal Services right. Here we see some user rights assignments which can be set by group policy. Items such as access this computer from a network, act as part of the operating system. All these are user right assignments. Permission. A permission defines the type of access that is granted to an object. An object can be identified with a security identifier or object attribute. The most common objects assigned permissions are NTFS files and folders, printers, and Active Directory objects. To keep track of which user can access an object and what the user can do is recorded in the access control list, which lists all users and groups that have access to the object. Settings are often used in Active Directory are the account lockout policies, which can be used to prevent hackers from repeatedly trying a username and password until they get in, also known as a brute force attack. These policies can be used to limit how many unsuccessful logins within a specified period of time.